The kingdom of my divine will in the midst of creatures. Book of Heaven, Volume 30, Part 14. May 30th, 1932. How the divine will looks for the act of the creature in order to form its life in her. Difference between the sacraments and the divine will. How the divine will is life, while the sacraments are effects of it. My little mind continues to cross the immense sea of the divine fiat. It seems to me that in all things, and even over the Supreme Being, it holds the first place of dominion and of command. And it says, "In vain do you escape me. In all things I can say, I am here. I am. I am here for you, to give you life. I am the insuperable one. No one can surpass me, either in love or in light, or in my immensity, in which I form as many lives of myself, for as many lives as I want to give to creatures." O power of the divine will! In your immensity, you look for the act of the creature, in order to form as many lives of yourself in each of their acts. But how many of these acts do not receive you and reject you? And your life remains suffocated within you, in your immensity. Ah, you, without tiring, with love that conquers everything, continue your searches of the human acts, to give your life and bilocate it in each instant. But while my mind was wandering in the sea of the fiat, my celestial teacher, Jesus, visiting his little daughter, told me, "Blessed daughter of my will, each act of the creature done in my will is a step that she takes in order to come closer to God. And God, in his turn, takes a step to draw near her." It can be said that the Creator and the creature are always on a journey. They never stop, one toward the other. My will descends into the act of the creature to form its step of divine life, and she ascends into the fiat, into the celestial regions, to make herself conqueror of light, of love, of sanctity, and celestial cognitions. So each act, word, breath, heartbeat, in my will, are as many steps of divine life that the creature takes. And my will longs for these acts in order to have its field of action, to be able to form as many divine lives in the creature. This was the purpose of creation, to form our life in the creature, to have our divine field of action in her. And this is why we love so much for her to do our divine will, to place our life in safety, not within ourselves. We have no need of anyone. We are more than sufficient to ourselves, but in the creature. This was the great portent that we wanted and want to make, by virtue of our will, to form our life in the life of the creature. Therefore, if we do not do this, the creature would remain without our original purpose, a hindrance to our love, a continuous bitterness. To look at it and see a work so great and of such great magnificence, unfulfilled, and our purpose failed. If the certainty that our will shall reign in the creature, to form our life in her, were not in us, our love would burn up the whole creation, and would reduce it to nothing. And if so much is endured and tolerated, it is because we see, beyond the times, our purpose fulfilled. Now, as the creature does her will, she draws back and takes a step backward from her Creator, and God draws back, and an infinite distance is formed between the two. See then the necessity to persevere in operating in my divine will in a continuous way, to reduce the great distance between God and the creature, produced by the human will. And do not think that it is a personal distance. I am everywhere, in every one, in heaven and on earth. The distance that the human will without mine forms is distance of sanctity, of beauty, of goodness, of power, of love. These are infinite distances that only my will operating in the creature can reunite and connect together, rendering one inseparable from the other. This happened in redemption. Each manifestation that we made on the descent of the Word upon earth was a step that we took toward the humankind. And as they longed for him, and prayed and manifested to my people our manifestations, prophecies, and revelations, so did they take as many steps toward the Supreme Being. So they were on a journey toward God, and we toward them. And as the time of the descent from heaven to earth drew near, so did prophets increase, to be able to make more revelations, to hasten the journey on both sides. This is so true that in the first times of the world there were no prophets, and our manifestations were so scarce that it can be said that one step per century was being taken. This delay in the journey caused coldness on the part of the creatures, and almost everyone held my descent upon earth as a way of speaking, something absurd, not a reality. Just as the kingdom of my will is thought of today, a way of speaking, and almost something that cannot be. So the prophets came after Moses, almost in the last times, close to my descent upon earth, and through our manifestations to them, the journey was hastened on both sides. And then came the sovereign Queen of Heaven, who not only walked, but ran to hasten the encounter with her Creator, to make him descend, and let him accomplish redemption. See then how my manifestations of my divine will are sure proofs that it is walking to come to reign upon earth, and that the creature to whom they have been given is walking and running with iron constancy to receive the first encounter, so as to give it her soul, in order to let it reign, and therefore give way to it, to let it reign in the midst of creatures. Therefore, let your acts be continuous, because only continuous acts are those which hasten the journey, surpass every obstacle, and are the only conquerors that conquer God and the creature. After this, the crowd of my thoughts on the divine will went on, and since I had received Holy Communion, I thought to myself, what difference is there between the sacraments and the divine will? And my sovereign Jesus, breaking his Eucharistic veils, made himself seen, and heaving a sorrowful sigh, told me, "My blessed daughter, the difference between one and the other is great. The sacraments are effects of my will, while my will is life, and as life, with its creative power, it forms and gives life to the sacraments. The sacraments do not have the virtue of giving life to my will, because my will is eternal, nor does it have a beginning or an end. On the other hand, my adorable will occupies always the first place in all things, and possessing the creative virtue by its own nature, it creates things, and its very life wherever it wants, when it wants, and the way it wants. It can be said that the difference is like a simile between the sun and the effects that the sun produces. These do not give life to the sun, but receive the life of the sun, and must remain at its disposal, because the life of the effects is produced by the sun. And then the sacraments are received in time, places, and circumstances. Baptism is given only once, and never again. The sacrament of penance is given when one falls into sin. My very sacramental life is given only once a day. And in this gap of time, the poor creature does not feel upon herself the strength, the help of the baptismal waters that regenerate her continuously, nor the sacramental words of the priest that fortify her in a continuous way by saying, "I absolve you from your sins." Nor does she find, in her weaknesses and trials of life, her sacramental Jesus for her to take at all hours of the day. On the other hand, my divine will, possessing the primary act of life and the capacity to give life, with its empire, holds the continuous act over the creature. In each instant it gives itself as life, life of light, of sanctity, of love, life of fortitude. In sum, with it as life, there are no times, circumstances, places, hours. There are no restrictions, nor any law, especially since it must give life. And life is formed with continuous acts, not at intervals. And therefore, in the ardor of its love, with its continuous empire, it can be said that it is continual baptism, absolution never interrupted, and communion of each instant. More so, since this will of ours was given to man in the beginning of his creation, as perennial life dwelling in him. This was the substance, the fruit of creation, our will that was to form our life in the creature. With this life, we gave everything. There was nothing he might need which he would not be able to find in this will of ours. It can be said that he would have at his disposal anything he might want: help, strength, sanctity, light. Everything was placed in his power, and my will took on the commitment to give him anything he wanted, as long as he would give it dominion, and would let it dwell in his soul. Therefore, it was not necessary to institute the sacraments when man was created, because in my will he possessed the origin and the life of all goods. The sacraments, as means of helps, of medicines, of forgiveness, had no reason to exist. But when man rejected this will of ours, as it withdrew, he remained without divine life, therefore without the nourishing virtue, without the continuous act of receiving new and increasing life. And if he did not die completely, it was because of the effects, which according to his dispositions, circumstances, and times, my divine will gave him. Now, as our paternal goodness saw that man kept falling lower and lower, in order to give him a support, a help, it gave him the law as norm of his life. In fact, in creation it gave him no law, nor anything else but my divine will, which by giving him continuous life, gave him our divine law as his own nature, in such a way that he was to feel it within himself as his own life, with no need for us to tell him and command him. More so, since wherever my will reigns, there are no laws nor commands. Laws are for servants, for rebels, not for one's children. Between us and those who live in our will, it all resolves in love. But with all the law, man did not recover. And since our ideal of creation had been man, and only for him was everything made, I wanted to come upon earth, then into their midst. And in order to give him more valid supports, more salutary medicines, surer means, more powerful helps, I instituted the holy sacraments, and these act in time and circumstances, according to the dispositions of the creatures, as effects and works of my divine will. But in spite of all this great good, if the soul does not let the divine will enter into her as life, she shall always have her miseries, a life in the middle. She shall feel her passions to the quick. Sanctity and even salvation shall always be in danger, because my will alone, that gives itself as continuous life, forms the sweet enchantment to passions, to miseries, and in the evils of the creatures, it forms the opposite acts of sanctity, of fortitude, of light, of love, in such a way that the human will, feeling the sweet enchantment, feels, flowing into its evils, the beauty, the goodness, the sanctity of the continuous act of life that my will gives it, under its gentle and sweet empire. And it lets my will do what it wants with it, because a continuous act that gives perennial life can never be matched by other acts, helps, and means, however strong and holy, in doing the good that a continuous act can do. Therefore, there is no greater evil that the creature can do to herself, nor greater wrong that she can do to our paternal goodness, than not letting our will reign in her. If it were in her power, she would induce us to destroy the whole creation, because the creature was made to be our dwelling. And not only her, but all created things, heaven, sun, earth, everything, since they are works come out of our supreme height. We have the right to inhabit them, and by inhabiting them, we preserve them with decorum, beautiful and always new, as in the act in which we issued them to the light. Now, by not doing our will, the creature puts herself out of our dwelling, and it happens to us as it would happen to a rich lord, who, wanting to build a great and beautiful palace for himself, when he has finished it, goes to live in it. But the doors shut in his face, the stones hurl themselves at him, in such a way that he is forced to stay out of it, prevented from living in the house that he himself has formed. Would it not deserve to be destroyed by the one who has formed it? Yet he does not do it, because he loves his work. But he waits and waits. Who knows? He might conquer it in love, and of its own it might open the doors to let him in, giving him the freedom to live in it. In such conditions does the creature put us, by not letting our will reign in her soul. She shuts the doors in our face, and hurls at us the stones of her sins. And we wait, with invincible and divine patience. And since she does not want our will as life within herself, with paternal goodness we give her the effects of it, which are the laws, the sacraments, the gospel, the helps of my examples and prayers. But of all this great good, nothing can equal the great good that my will can do as perennial life of the creature, because my will is altogether law, sacraments, gospel, life. It means everything, being able to give everything, possessing everything. And this is enough to be able to comprehend the great difference that exists between my will as continuous life in the creature and its effects, which it can produce, not in a perennial way, but in circumstances and time, even in the sacraments. And although the effects can do great good, yet they can never come to produce all the goods that the life of my divine will reigning and dominating in the creature can produce. Therefore, be attentive, my daughter, and give it the holy freedom to do whatever it wants in your soul. Fiat. June 12th, 1932. One who lives in the divine will, find all the divine works in act and done for her. One who lives in the divine will, does the office of breeze for the divine works. My little soul keeps going around within the divine fiat. It feels the irresistible need to live in it, because in it I find everything at my disposal. Everything is mine. Even more, I feel as though a secret invitation that all created things make me in the depth of my heart, saying to me with mute voice, "Come into our midst. Come to possess us and to enjoy the many beautiful works that our Creator made for you and to give us to you." Oh, what a sweet enchantment the whole creation has, looked through the veils of the divine will. But while my little soul was as though enveloped in the sweet enchantment of all creation, my beloved Jesus, repeating for me his dear little visit, told me, "My blessed daughter, for one who lives in my divine will, everything is present. Past and future do not exist for her. Everything is in act. Since she enters the divine order, our paternal goodness does not want to give a love past, which it had in creation, or a love that is to come. This would not reach into the heart of the creature, because to her it shall seem that the love that was unleashed from our womb in creation would be like a love and a work that are not directed to her, and those of the future like love and works to be hoped for. More so, since in us past and future don't even exist. Past and future are for one who lives outside of our will, because she looks only at the exteriority of our works, not inside of them, while one who lives in it looks at our works inside of us, and looks at our creation as continuous, and for each creature. So, for the happy creature who lives in our will, we let her see and touch with her own hands our acts of stretching out the heavens, of creating the sun, the wind, the air, the sea, and so forth, all for her. And she sees and comprehends with clarity our intense love in each thing created for her, our power and wisdom in ordering them for love of her, in such a way that she feels involved and as though drowned under the waves of our love, power, wisdom, and goodness of each created thing. And while she feels drowned, she sees that creation for her shows no sign of ending. It never says enough, but the creating act continues, always continues. And seeing that our creating and operating act never ceases, she echoes our love and never ceases loving us. Oh, how beautiful it is to find in the creature a continuous love that never ceases, just as our own never ceases. Even more, seeing herself drowned by our continuous love of sustaining the creating act for love of her, in order to requite us, she makes use of her stratagems to imitate us, and she says to us, "Supreme Majesty, oh, if I had the power, I too would make as many heavens, suns, and everything that you can do, for love of you. But since I am unable to, I give you heavens and sun and everything that you have given me, to tell you that I want to love you very, very much. And oh, how happy and requited we remain, for the creature makes use of and gives us our love, made her own, to love us. Therefore, in our will, There are no dissimilar things between creator and creature. If she loves, she makes use of our love to love us. If she works in our works. Nor does she love or work outside of our love and of our works. We can say that our love is hers, and hers is ours. And we have done our works together with her. Hear, then, how this living in our will makes us and the creature happy. Because we created her, for we want to interact with her, be together, work together, delight and love each other together. Our purpose was not to keep her far away. No, no, but together and fused with us. And in order to keep her absorbed, we gave her our creating and operating act, which, as it created things, so formed its waves of love and opened veins of happiness in the creature, in such a way that she was to feel within herself not only our will, our life palpitating and operating, but the sea of our joys and our happinesses, so much so as to feel paradise in her soul. And not only is creation always in act, but also redemption is always in act. And one who lives in my divine will feels the continuous act of my descent from heaven to earth. And it is precisely for her, for love of her, that I descend. I am conceived, I am born, I suffer, and I die. Everything for her. And in order to give me tit for tat, I descend, and she receives me, is conceived in me, is born again with me, lives together with me, and dies with me, to rise again with me. There is nothing I have done which she does not want to do together with me. So I feel her inseparable from creation, inseparable from redemption, and from everything I did. And if she is inseparable from all our works, from my very life, what should I not give to one who lives in our will? How could I not centralize everything in her? If I did not do it, my love would not tolerate it. Therefore, if you want everything, live in my will. I cannot give things by half, but everything. And you shall have the great good of feeling within yourself are operating in continuous act. And oh, how you will comprehend how much you have been loved by your Creator, and how obliged you are to love Him. After this, I abandoned all of myself into the arms of the divine will. But because of certain sorrowful memories, my mind was restless. And my sweet Jesus, having compassion for me, came and blessed me. His blessing was like beneficial dew that put me in the perfect calm, and I felt like a tiny little one, all timid, come out and freed from a storm. And my beloved Jesus, all goodness, told me, "My good daughter, courage, do not fear, because courage is the powerful weapon that kills timidity and puts to flight every fear. Put everything aside, and come into my divine will, to form your breeze to all our works. They are all in order in our Fiat, but do not move. They want the breeze of the creature in order to move their step toward them. And if the breeze is strong, they run, they fly, to be the bearers of the good that each of our works possesses. So the soul who enters into our will, as she enters, unites herself with our acts to do hers within our own. And as she unites herself, she forms the breeze, and with the very strength of our will, she moves, she calls, she captures, she forces all our works with her sweet and penetrating breeze, and she puts them on the way toward creatures. Oh, how happy we are! How we long for this sweet and refreshing breeze that the creature brings us in our will. Therefore be attentive, and do not want to lose peace. Otherwise, you shall not be able to come into our will to form your breeze, the sweet refreshments, the freshness to our ardent love, and the motion to our works. In fact, no one but peaceful souls enter into our will. There is no place for others. And if it does not hear you follow its steps, and its works are not surrounded by the cortege of your breeze, with sorrow it says to you, "Oh, the daughter of my will has remained behind, and has left me alone without her company. Now, my daughter, you must know that our divine being, as he created man, remained over him in act of pouring from us sanctity, light, love, goodness, beauty, and so forth. So, by withdrawing from our divine will, he withdrew from under our reign. Now, when the soul comes into our will, as she forms for us the breeze and moves all our works with her acts within our own, we form the rain, and we pour ourselves first over the fortunate creature, and then over all. And just as the favorable breeze in our fiat calls the rains, invokes it, longs for it from our Supreme Being, so the operating of the human will outside of ours forms the contrary wind and drives away our beneficial rain, causing it to remain up in the air. Here is why many creatures can be seen like parched lands, without flowering and without fruits. But this does no harm to the soul who lives in our divine will. She draws apart from everyone and comes to live with her divine family, and she feels upon herself our continuous reign that our divinity forms over her. Fiat. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 30, Part 14. Fiat.